By the mid-1960s, John Wayne Gacy had made a name for himself as a young civic leader in Springfield, Illinois, and by all accounts had a promising future. But the ambitious family man was hiding a sexual compulsion that threatened to ruin him. In 1966, John, his wife Marlene, and their infant son moved to Waterloo, Iowa, a small town about 100 miles north of Des Moines. John's father-in-law owned 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants in Waterloo. Business was booming, and he needed a manager. So, at 24, his son-in-law began learning the restaurant business. John loved being the boss and insisted that his employees and friends call him Colonel.
He wanted to be able to control people. He loved the idea that he could tell people, this is what I want you to do. I'm the boss.
John put in 16-hour days, but his commitment to the JCs never faltered. He was soon considered the most valuable new member in the Waterloo chapter.
I think probably it's just John's personality. He was very ambitious and wanted to be loved by everybody and liked by everybody and accepted, and it was just his way.
Local JC President Charles Hill was impressed with John's charm and powers of persuasion. The JCs appointed him chairman of their membership drive.
And talk about a membership chairman that no holds barred. I mean, he just did everything he could do to get new members, and he did it. He did the job.
Gacy lured men into joining the JCs by inviting them to the Clayton House Motel, where he screened illegal stag films and hosted orgies with prostitutes. In one evening, he signed up 20 new members. John's sexual romps also carried over into his marriage, with the full participation of his wife, Marlene. After an evening out, they would often swap spouses with other couples. When John's sister, Karen, came in from Chicago for a visit, her brother and sister-in-law revealed their little bedroom secrets.
He said, sometimes we don't always go home with the same persons we came with. I really thought it was a joke, but when it came time to go home, he took somebody else home to their house. That was the first time I felt I didn't know my brother, that I didn't know him. And I definitely, you can imagine how my thoughts diminished about this sister-in-law.
The Waterloo JCs knew all about John's sexual escapades, but that didn't keep him from earning enough votes to win the JC vice presidency and being honored as their Man of the Year. By 1967, he was a shoo-in for JC president and the father of another child named Christine. Yet there was a side to Gacy that his family and cronies had never seen, an insatiable lust for teenage boys. One afternoon, while Marlene and the kids were away, John invited over 15-year-old Donald Voorhees, whose father was a JC and an Iowa state senator. Gacy asked the teenager if he had ever watched a stag film. When he said no, John set up the projector in his basement. He got Donald drunk to lower his inhibitions, then forced himself on the boy. Young Voorhees engaged in oral sex with Gacy. Afterwards, John hinted that he had mob connections back in Chicago. He threatened the teenager and paid him $50 for his silence.
The kid, over the next period of time, just was beside himself, couldn't do anything, did not go to the police right away, felt, as Gacy had said, that in fact nobody would believe him.
In March 1968, the teenager finally broke down and revealed everything to his family. His parents pressed charges against Gacy, who was arrested and charged with sodomy.
Well, Gacy took the charges out there terribly. He was at first very, very vigilant in his protection of himself and his family. He was one of these it was one-on-one. It wasn't me who did this. I wouldn't have done it. The kid's a liar.
Gacy was convinced he could outsmart his accusers and insisted he be given a lie detector test. He failed. Investigators even joked that the only truthful answer came when he was asked his name.
He felt that his world had crumbled. People would see him coming and they didn't want to be around him. And I think it drastically affected his personality.
During the investigation, other teenage boys came forward with allegations of sexual abuse. Gacy pleaded guilty to the sodomy charge, but insisted that 15-year-old Voorhees willingly engaged in oral sex with him.
This young individual made the charge at me. He claims that he was sexually abused by me. And in essence, he was blackmailing me for it. Now, what it boiled down to was oral copulation. And it was consensual.
The judge didn't see it that way and gave Gacy the maximum sentence, 10 years at the state penitentiary in Anamosa. He would never see his wife Marlene or his children again. Gacy arrived at the prison in December 1968.
It's like he accepted it, like I did the crime so I get the time. And I mean, he didn't say anything, but just, he didn't break down. Again, he didn't cry. He did not cry. We all cried, including my father.
Even behind bars, Gacy aggressively pursued all of the social outlets available to him. He not only made friends with fellow prisoners, but he mingled with the guards, social workers, and even the warden. Within 8 months, Gacy landed a job as head cook in the prison kitchen. He loved trying out new recipes for the inmates.
I can say unreservedly that the quality of the food improved dramatically. One thing John was a very, very, very fine cook. And he understood something that traditionally folks who cook in prisons don't understand. He understood the use of spices.
In December 1969, a TV film crew visited the prison to shoot a segment called Christmas at Anamosa. In this rare footage, the head cook spoke with pride about the meal he was preparing for his fellow inmates.
The men, with the exception of the turkey, which they get a generous proportion of, and the pumpkin pie that will be served, are allowed to take as much as they want to eat. The only requirement is that you eat what you take.
After his interview, Gacy joined the prison choir in singing a carol. But this holiday season would be John's worst. Back in Chicago, his father was battling cirrhosis of the liver. On Christmas morning, John Stanley Gacy died. The news devastated his son. He was convinced that his father died of shame over his sodomy conviction.
He felt like he stripped him of any dignity. He was remorseful about that, that he disappointed him in such a way that it killed him. And a lot of times we'd sit and we'd talk, and I'd say, John, you didn't. It was a disease. Dad's drinking is what created his death.
Gacy's grief quickly turned to rage, which he took out on inmates he suspected were gay. One afternoon while walking back to his cell, he spotted 2 prisoners having oral sex. Gacy kicked one of the men in the face, then returned to his cell.
There was someone who was struggling with an inner demon that did not have to do with hating homosexuals, but with being attracted to them. And John hated prison every day that he was there. After his father's death, a lot of hates, including that one, became much more powerful in his personality.
On June 18, 1970, prison officials released him on good behavior. He had served 16 months of his 10-year sentence.